Most passenger jets bow out after about 25 years of service. The metal gets tired, the maintenance costs explode, and airlines send them to the desert graveyards of Arizona and California. So riddle me this. Why are jets built when Michael Jackson was moonwalking and Reagan was president still carrying paying passengers today in 2025? Not cargo, not private flights, but regular people buying tickets and boarding aircraft that first flew before the internet existed. After tracking down flight records from Tehran to the Canadian Arctic, I discovered something airlines knew but never advertise. These 1980s survivors aren't flying because airlines are desperate or cheap. They're flying because they can do jobs that would literally destroy a brand new Airbus or Boeing. And the reason they're still safe might completely change how you think about the planes you fly on. Here's what people get wrong about aircraft age. Planes don't age like cars or smartphones. They age by cycles and care, not birthdays. Every time a jet takes off and lands, the fuselage expands and contracts like a balloon. That's one cycle. A short-haul jet doing 6 flights a day ages faster than a long-haul jet doing 1 flight. And if you maintain that aircraft to specification, replacing parts before they wear out, X-raying the structure for cracks, rebuilding engines on schedule, that 40-year-old jet can be safer than one that rolled off the production line last month. The real question isn't how old the plane is, it's whether that plane fits the mission and whether someone's willing to pay for the maintenance. On certain routes, where modern jets can't land, can't carry enough, or simply cost too much to acquire, these 1980s workhorses aren't just competitive, they're irreplaceable. So let's meet 8 passenger jets from the 1980s that are still earning their keep in 2025, counting down from the most common to the most incredible survivor of them all. Starting at number 8, we have the Boeing 717, which technically wasn't built in the 1980s but carries the DNA of jets that were. Delta Airlines and Hawaiian Airlines still fly these rear-engine beauties in 2025, and here's why that matters. The 717 is basically the final evolution of the DC-9 and MD-80 family that dominated the 1980s. Same rear-mounted engines, same tough-as-nails construction, just with modern avionics stuffed inside. Delta uses them for high-frequency shuttle routes out of Atlanta where they need a jet that can handle 8 or 9 flights a day without breaking a sweat. Hawaiian flies them between the islands, where saltire and volcanic ash could eat a composite aircraft alive. These jets were built between 1999 and 2006, making them the babies of our list, but they represent something important, proof that 1980s design philosophy still works. Delta had planned to retire them by 2025, but guess what? They're still flying because nothing else can match their quick turnaround capability. Hawaiian hasn't even announced a replacement yet. The 717 shows us that sometimes old-school engineering wrapped in a newer package is exactly what airlines need. Number 7 takes us into true Cold War territory with the Tupolev Tu-145M. Picture this, 3 engines, 2 mounted on the rear fuselage and 1 buried in the tail, creating a howl that sounds like nothing else in aviation. Nearly all scheduled passenger Tu-145s have been retired, but a handful of VIP-configured examples still carry paying passengers on charter flights in 2025. These aren't regular airline operations. We're talking about wealthy Russians who want to fly in Soviet style, aviation enthusiasts who pay premium prices for the experience, and occasionally government officials in former Soviet states who trust these jets more than Western aircraft. The Tu-145M represents the peak of Soviet medium-haul design, built to operate from rough fields in Siberia where the temperature hits -60 and the nearest maintenance base is 2,000 miles away. Finding one to fly on requires connections and cash, but they are out there, keeping the tri-jet dream alive. Within 5 years, these will probably all be in museums, making them the rarest birds on our list. Coming in at number 6, the Boeing 757-200 proves that sometimes airlines keep old jets flying because nothing new can replace them. United Airlines is scheduled to fly 757s on transatlantic routes through summer 2025, and Iceland Air still operates them alongside their newer fleet. This is the unicorn of aviation, a narrow-body jet with wide-body range, capable of flying from New York to Edinburgh fully loaded while burning less fuel than a wide-body. The 757 was a 1980s design that became legendary for its performance. Pilots call it the sports car of airliners because of how it climbs. It can blast out of high-altitude airports in summer heat, cruise efficiently at 41,000 feet, and land on relatively short runways. United uses them on thin transatlantic routes where a wide-body would fly half-empty. Iceland connects Reykjavik to North America with them, taking advantage of their range and efficiency. The 757 is slowly being replaced by the Airbus A321XLR, but that replacement keeps getting delayed. Every summer, airlines realize they need the 757s for another season. Some aviation analysts think we'll still see passenger 757s flying in 2030. making them the longest-lasting Western jets from the 1980s still in scheduled service. Number 5 brings us to the last flying wide-body twins from the early jet age, the Airbus A300-600 still operating in Iran. Iran Air and Iran Air Tour fly the final passenger A300s anywhere on Earth, and the story of why they're still airborne is equal parts engineering and geopolitics. The A300 was Airbus's first aircraft, designed in the 1970s and refined into the 600 variant in the late 1980s. Most airlines retired them years ago, but Iran can't buy new Western aircraft due to sanctions, so they keep these wide bodies flying on high-demand domestic routes and even some international services. Iran Air Tour actually planned Tehran to Paris A300 flights in 2025, though whether those materialize depends on diplomatic wins. These jets fill a perfect niche. Bigger than narrow bodies for busy domestic routes, smaller than modern wide bodies that Iran can't obtain anyway. They're tough, relatively simple to maintain, and Iranian engineers have gotten incredibly creative keeping them airworthy. We're talking about machine shops in Tehran reverse engineering fan blades, avionic techs creating workarounds for systems Airbus stopped supporting a decade ago. The sight of an A300 in 2025 is like seeing a classic car on the highway, except this classic is carrying 250 people at 500 miles per hour. Number 4 actually covers 2 operators flying the same aircraft type, the McDonnell Douglas MD-80 series, with both Kish Air and Iran Air Tour operating these rear-engine workhorses in 2025. The MD-80, nicknamed the Mad Dog by pilots, represents peak 1980s airline economics. Burn more fuel but cost less to buy and maintain. Both Iranian carriers fly MD-82s and MD-83s that first carried passengers in Europe and America during the late 1980s and early 1990s. Photographers spotted Kish Air MD-82s operating in Tehran Mehrabad in May 2025, proving these jets aren't hidden away for emergencies. They're flying daily schedules. The long, narrow fuselage with engines mounted way back by the tail makes them instantly recognizable. That T-tail sitting up high gives them an elegant profile that modern jets can't match. Why keep flying 40-year-old MD-80s? For Iranian carriers, it's about matching capacity to demand on 1 to 2 hour domestic flights. These jets carry about 150 passengers, perfect for routes between Tehran and cities like Shiraz or Isfahan. They're also mechanically simpler than modern jets, with systems that skilled mechanics can fix without computers or proprietary diagnostic tools. The JT-8D engines are thirsty by modern standards, but when you can't buy new jets and fuel is subsidized by your government, fuel burn becomes less important than keeping aircraft flying. Moving up to number 3, we find the Fokker 100s operated by Alliance Airlines in Australia, doing a job that would destroy most modern jets within months. Alliance has become the world's Fokker specialist, flying these Dutch-designed regional jets on fly-in, fly-out missions to remote mining sites across the Australian outback. The Fokker 100 might be the best-looking jet on our list, with its low-slung fuselage, rear-mounted Rolls-Royce Tay engines, and distinctive Dutch engineering. These jets were designed in the 1980s and built into the 1990s before Fokker went bankrupt. Alliance bought them cheap and turned them into desert warriors. We're talking about landing on remote strips where the temperature hits 120 degrees Fahrenheit, where red dust gets into everything, where the nearest city might be 500 miles away. Alliance backs their Fokker fleet with something remarkable: complete in-house maintenance and the world's largest stock of Fokker spare parts. They bought entire aircraft just to strip for parts. They have mechanics who know these jets better than Fokker's original engineers. The company is adding Embraer E190s to their fleet, but they're keeping the Fokkers for the really tough missions. As long as Australian mining companies need to move workers to remote sites, these 1980s jets will keep earning their keep. Number 2 brings us to something truly special: the Boeing 737-200 still operated by Nolinor Aviation in Canada's Arctic. These aren't just old 737s. They're the original classic model with low bypass engines and something you won't see on any modern jet: gravel kits. Picture a nose gear with what looks like a ski attached to deflect rocks, engine intake surrounded by vortex dissipators that look like metal fingers, belly armor to protect against stones kicked up during landings. These modifications let the 737-200 land on unpaved strips across the Canadian Arctic, serving mining operations and remote communities where building a paved runway would cost more than buying a fleet of jets. These aircraft from the late 1970s and early 1980s found new life in the north after Southern Airlines retired them. Nolinor wasn't just keeping them flying, they're actually adding more 737-200s to meet demand. Think about that. In 2025, a Canadian airline is expanding their fleet of 40-plus-year-old jets because nothing new can do what they do. Boeing stopped building gravel kit-capable 737s decades ago. The new 737 MAX would literally destroy itself trying to land where these classics operate daily. The maintenance on these Arctic warriors is something to behold. Engines rebuilt to handle ice crystal ingestion, hydraulics modified to work at -50, interiors stripped down and reinforced to carry mining equipment one day and passengers the next. Canadian North retired their last 737-200 in 2023, but no keeps proving there's life in these old dogs yet. Which brings us to number 1, the most remarkable story of our countdown. The combined fleet of 1980s jets still flying in Iran, creating an entire aviation ecosystem frozen in time. We've already talked about individual Iranian operations, but the big picture is even more incredible. Iran operates the world's largest collection of 1980s Western passenger jets, not by choice, but by necessity, and they've turned maintaining these aircraft into an art form. Think about what Iranian aviation engineers have accomplished. They keep Airbus A300s flying without Airbus support. They maintain MD-80s without McDonnell Douglas, which doesn't even exist anymore. They manufacture parts that haven't been produced elsewhere for decades. They've created an entire parallel aviation industry, reverse engineering components, developing new maintenance procedures, training mechanics on aircraft that Western schools haven't taught for years. This isn't about keeping old planes flying. It's about proving that with enough determination, engineering skill, and necessity-driven innovation, aircraft can fly far beyond their intended service life. Every Iranian mechanic working on these jets becomes a historian, an engineer, and an inventor rolled into one. They're writing maintenance manuals for situations the original manufacturers never even imagined. The Iranian 1980s fleet represents something profound about aviation and human ingenuity. These jets were built during the Cold War, designed to last maybe 30 years. Yet here they are at 40 plus years old, still carrying passengers safely because humans figured out how to make it work. They've become flying monuments to what happens when political reality meets engineering excellence. While the rest of aviation chases the newest, lightest, and most efficient designs, these operators remind us that the best airplane isn't always the newest one. Sometimes it's the one that fits the mission, the one you can afford to maintain, the one that can land where others can't. These 1980s survivors aren't flying because airlines are stuck in the past. They're flying because for certain jobs, in certain places, under certain conditions, they're still the best tool for the job. And that's a lesson worth remembering next time someone tells you that newer is always better.